I've called the conversations I'm facilitating here enough of blood and tears enough, with an emphasis on the question mark. I've added to Rabin's passionate plea on the White House lawn. This play, November 4th, it cries out from the brokenness in Israeli society stemming from events of 30 years ago and more. The unfulfilled dilemma of the Palestinian agency of truly hearing Palestinian aspirations are only a whisper in this play's, well, actually, I have written here background, but it's in the foreground. I'm someone with Israeli family, deeply moved by Rabin's words and his evolution, but I found my way to a calling and spent more than a decade of working visits to the West Bank to assist and represent in the US a Palestinian movement organizing Palestinians for social change and self-determination. I now contemplate, with all of us, ashes and ruins as Israel's trauma of October 7th led to Israel's savage destruction of Gaza, costing tens of thousands of Palestinian lives, and as the noose tightens violently on the West Bank in East Jerusalem. So we reach out to people doing extraordinary work, Jews and Arabs and others, to help appreciate identities and center unheard voices, to connect and lift our humanity and our capacity to feel both peoples belonging to this land, which I think undergirded this play. Now what was the last word here? It's also, what do we do? Two such extraordinary people are with me, Maya Berry and Rabbi Marc Gopin. You have their detailed bios in your programs. Maya is executive director of the Arab American Institute, has spent years organizing to elevate the rights, power, and contributions of Arab Americans to our society and to the world. Marc is a special spiritual voice among American Jews who is profoundly engaged with communities in deep conflict around the globe, listening to and developing how their faiths can help build paths of mutual respect. So, Maya and Marc, I'd like to ask you your first reactions to the play, how it hit you, and maybe we might start to imagine a new play toward the future from a Palestinian voice on how we might go forward into a better time. But let's start with this play.
Pass the mic.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Well, first, thank you for our audience taking time on a Thanksgiving weekend to engage in conversations like this. And thank you to Stephen for asking. Full confession, I generally don't do musicals. So when Stephen asked, I didn't realize it was. But I have to, I would start by pointing out the seriousness of the performances. The performers were just, I think, incredible in their job today. For someone who, it's such a serious topic in such an interesting way, and they made it work, and they made it work very effectively. In terms of my response to it, it's, I have the same response when I think very internal conversations that I'm sort of just observing. And I think it felt like that very much. I think it attempted to be honest as best as it could from the perspective that it's sharing. And I think it's a internal conversation in the Jewish American community or in Israeli communities. But I'm, as one who represents a community directly impacted by that conversation, I'm always interested in learning more.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. Good art should make you speechless. So it's a little bit paradoxical to ask us to say something, when the response should be silence and bewilderment, especially because the artist here has embodied something that I've been very taken with I've been working in Israel, Palestine for 40 years. That's a long time. And I was always in between. I was going in between enemies. And I know people who are in this personally, and I worked with them too. And so that this hits to the bone, you know, it cuts to the bone. And I once, when I was young, in my 20s, I was already taken with a world that Anna DeVere Smith had revolutionized, with the ability to embody two at once. So I knew already in my late 20s that I could move people to tears in sermons. I was a rabbi and I was giving sermons on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And I said, whoa, you know, I have something here that's theatrical. So I said, okay, I'm going to try this in peace training. So not that much longer, I had these classes where I was teaching people from around the world on training and peace building. And they were from every conflict imaginable. And so I decided to embody and play at the same time a religious settler and an Islamist fighter and a PLO fighter, and I did it in the same classroom.
Wow.
And I traumatized them because they really were not used to being that close to both sides of a narrative. They were used to, you know, victim side, whoever they thought the victim was. So this is a very powerful thing that you've done here, and forced the audience to listen in an empathic way to terribly opposite narratives and very, very dangerous people, and bring those dangerous people alive. So I thank you for that. I've spent 40 years trying to understand monstrosity in the name of violence. I've tried to understand that fascination with that hollow bullet, you know, that a very religious person could see as purification. You know, the theme of purification is in all the major conflicts, there are purifiers. And they're the most dangerous, because the purification of the earth requires genocidal behavior, requires the elimination of the other. So my first reaction is, you know, just how powerfully the artist here, Ari,
I'm just a producer.
Oh, you're just a producer.
I'm just the producer.
Who wrote the words?
Danny Poller is the composer. Myron Novak is the book writer. It's their 10-year collaboration.
I came in ignorant of that. My apologies. I just know Ari, so I feel for Ari. So I just see everything through Ari's eyes. But yes, the artist and the writer.
It's a collective enterprise,
Yeah.
but it's their achievement.
And the actors brought it alive in ways that were too powerful for me, because this is intimate. This is me. Yigal Amir was my biography. I could have been him. I had the same studies, the same character, the same. In the 80s, I was embodying this as I fought Mayor Kahana in conversations face to face at Brandeis. So this is very close to the bone of understanding the nature of this. But that's my first reaction. I want to get to the gentleman's, you know, what's next question next.
So, if I may, I want to bring it to the now here, which maybe isn't directly dealing with the subject of the plays, but I want to read to each of you and have the other respond first to things that you have each publicly said on the problems of our time that I think speak back to this. So first I'll read something from Mara and ask Marc to respond first, and then you to elaborate. You won't be surprised, Maya, it's about your testimony before the Senate. And here's a little bit of the transcript. Maya Berry, I do not support Hamas. I do not support Hamas or any interrupted by, now, Senator Kennedy of Louisiana. You can't bring yourself to say you don't support UNRWA, you don't support Hamas. It was very clear in my support for UNRWA. You don't support Hezbollah, you don't support Iran, you should hide your head in a bag. Now, on NPR, Maya said, the direct attack was obviously racist and sexist. The exchanges with some of the other members on that side of the aisle were profoundly confusing. They were introducing foreign policy conversations and furthering really the dehumanization of Arab Americans and specifically Palestinians in an extraordinary way. And the point is that we have seen an increase in hate, we've seen an increase in anti-Semitism, we've seen an increase in the Latin community, the Latino community being targeted, Asian Americans, the LGBT community. Like, it's a record-breaking year after year targeting all communities. So it's extraordinary to take that and turn it into a conversation like some members chose to do. And I would point out that part of the dehumanization of Arabs and Palestinians in particular is not even just, say, of dual loyalty to a country. It's this bizarre sense of a desire to support violence, and your interview said as if being a Muslim or Arab means you are supportive of violence. So first, I'd like Marc to respond. Battering in public.
I wish I was there to support you. I didn't know. I haven't gone to Capitol Hill very much since the 90s. That was when we did some fabulous work between Republicans and Democrats and interfaith approaches to changing the American reality. And anyways, that's my own narrative. I'm sorry I wasn't there to support you. I'm sorry a lot of us weren't there. It just, there's a line, in my opinion, from Gandhi to King to Bobby Kennedy to Yitzhak Rabin, of the evolution of character of extraordinary people who go from warriors, cold warriors, hot warriors to peacemakers, is how vulnerable they make the process by concentrating all the fate of history on their person. And a lot of my field and a lot of our work is saying, no, that's not good enough. And that we've now been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that political leaders are not the answer. And now we have such a gross example of pseudo-leaders who are such barbarians that it takes us even further to the tragedy that even though a Yitzhak Rabin, he does what we call tshuva. He evolves from a strong warrior in 1948. He does things that he says, he confesses in his biography, his autobiography, I did march 40,000 people along the sea. I did march people out of their villages. And then he is the one that's going to sit and deal with Arafat, who he didn't like very much, but he knew. So, but why did it fail? Because it's all concentrated in a person, and that makes bullets too powerful. Instead of it being a people-to-people process of millions of people that should have gone through the emotional transformation that Rabin and Arafat went through. It was too fragile, and therefore they were never safe. So my frustration is that we're still trying to kowtow to somebody like Kennedy, a senator like that, many corrupt barbarians who've now been able to achieve high office. That to me is we're still not getting it as to how history changes. History doesn't change with men like that. They follow when we make the winds go in a different direction, and that is a very complicated process.
Do you want to respond to Marc's response? Huh? Did you say enough on NPR? Please.
No, I appreciate that, and I have to say I felt very, very supported by my friends in the Jewish
Maya, hold it a little closer.
I'm sorry. There you go.
Great.
I appreciate that very much, and I have to say that I felt very supported by my friends in the Jewish American community, including the victims who lost a grandmother from Tree of Life, who were at the hearing that day. I just saw them again in September every time I go, and so there is a shared understanding of how the base of the politics that's been deployed. But what I think about in that situation isn't even that senator or the other one. It's the staffer that prepped the memo that thought that the appropriate line of thinking to go after, I wasn't there as a subject matter expert on hate crime, but they thought that would be the effective line. And the challenge in that situation is well, I don't want to talk about that situation, but what I would say in the context of sort of this piece of it, the way that we understanding the power of the narrative here, right? His experience in the Haganah is defined as a young soldier who admitted what he admitted, right? That's terrorism by a different definition that gets deployed against one particular side versus another one. So I understand the complexities that play out when a man comes from that experience and then says, I want to do that now, I'm going to make this peace agreement. But our perspective is, it's the narrative of this, right? I mean, you say Rabin to me and I don't think of Oslo, I think of broken bones. That's just where it stops. And that's the importance of understanding these conversations is always to, you're a rabbi, so I have no ground to stand on in relation to the conversations that we're having about how meaningful the purpose of life is in this situation. Like, that man decided, this is where he started, pre-48, right? This is where he gets to and says, I have to do this because I think it's the right thing to do. And then the story is told. And when we receive that story, I think the importance is to understand again and again and again, what are the stories that aren't being told? And why did that congressional staffer think the right narrative was to come at me with that line of questioning when you wouldn't ever look at, you know, a Rabin in that context? So it's just it's the power of the narrative that is deployed.
So I'm going to read some recent comments from Marc, and then we'll get to the what now. I think it includes the news stories that need to be told. Now, we've heard some of this already from Marc, and I won't go into the details of the controversy he's responding to of Peter Bonior going to speak in Israel on crimes against Palestinians, and then regretting he'd broken his boycott stance. Again, I'll ask Maya to respond, and then Marc. Here's Marc. I've been in between Jews and Palestinians since 1983. I will always be in between, and that this is the only space of life of healing of a living future. I've watched many ardent Zionists who would have had nothing to do with me in the 80s become ardent critics of Israel and even anti-Zionists. I like fellow travelers who try to stop killing, who try to save lives on all sides. I am glad Peter has done so much good work since his Zionist days. I'm not here to judge each journey. I believe in the middle, period. But we need not disparage each other. I don't believe in boycotts as effective as many people do. I think investment is more effective than divestment of a particular kind of investment that is never done. Again, Peter has made very important bridges and stood against the most horrific Jewish option for mass murder that has ever been perpetrated in 2,000 years. At the same time, I will not judge Israelis as a group. I will engage. I will find what to lift up because that is what compassionate ethics and justice demands.
I respect that deeply and I disagree with the part about the boycott and divestment piece. But I respect it completely. It's a reasonable position to hold and to find. I come from the perspective of, people used to say, where's the Palestinian Gandhi, right? And then anyone from, we took a nonviolent boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement and literally deemed it anti-Semitic and harmful and rendered it outside of the scope of what is acceptable civic engagement, participation. So when there has been an opportunity for Palestinians to rise up against an occupation, to seek their liberation in a way that we would deem acceptable, we've pushed further and further from what we consider to be the right thing to do. And I think there's a shared sense, we self-select into this, right? So there's a shared sense of how wrong violence is, period, full stop. So if that's where we can agree, and I think we can, then these other movements to isolate a country that's engaged, and it's been engaging, and as hard as it is, I know, for people to hear. I have to tell you, the first time I engaged in Arab-Jewish dialogue was with an incredible philosophy professor, Elias Baumgarten, who we lost 2 years ago, passed away. For me, it was an eye-opening experience about someone who cared so deeply about applying. He used to challenge me, saying I had an occasional moral compass. Situational ethics is how he would phrase it for me. But he applied his moral and ethics across the board, period. There was it didn't deviate for this because I felt a certain way. So when I would say, this is a political ideology that does this, this, or that, he would say, yes, it is, and we would have those conversations. And then, I think I got to a point where I honestly didn't do a lot of dialogue anymore because it became more and more frustrating to be engaged in dialogue when the material realities didn't change. But I understand the perspective you articulate there. I understand and respect it. And the more we talk, the more I want to push you on it. So I guess maybe I do continue on dialogue, please.
That's great. I want to fill out something from there. That's
Okay.
not, look, we don't live in an equal society. All democracies are aspirations to democracy. They're not real democracies. And we have an aspiration to democracy here that at the present time is particularly dangerous for Arabs and Muslims to speak their mind. Whereas Jews, it's okay for us to just scream and shout about anti-Semitism constantly, and it can even undo universities at this point. So it's an insane moment when Jews are experiencing very anti-Semitic things around the world, very anti-Semitic things even in the highest levels of this government. And at the same time, we're also not facing a lot of things by screaming about it. I just want to be clear, I've spent my life with PLO fighters, with colonels and generals in the Palestinian army, with people who were from the PFLP, and if you know, they were actually more radical, but it turns out they were more democratic and more in refugee camps, and I spent time with them there. All ex-combatants working deeply with Jewish people. So they were both fighters with the right to self-defense and the right to resistance, which I believe in. At the same time, they're ex-combatants in loving relationships with Jews, trying to work for together in Israel-Palestine. So it's a paradoxical kind of thing when it comes to BDS. It's not that I disagree with the right to self-defense, even violently. It's that I see so many living examples of people who've sacrificed their lives to be in deep relationship across enemy lines, that I feel they're silenced by the whole debate here of normalization versus anti-normalization. We don't get at the deep ingredients of coexistence that leads to a new reality. So that's where I'm at, and it's just a weird state to be in.
So, until Ari shuts us down, let's go to the audience to deal with what now and what is that next story. Is there anyone who just wants to ask a question? Say just a few sentences with that question, if you will. I'll bring you the microphone. Okay.
So I want to preface this by saying that, Molly, we don't know each other. Maya, sorry. I just proved that.
Mara, Maya.
But saying that I respect what you said, and what you said was reasonable, and I disagree, is one of the most beautiful things I've heard in a long time. I don't hear that very often. I almost never see that on social media. And it was just nice to hear that.
Mm.
And I disagree with you. And I guess what I want to ask in terms of what next, how can we do this without dialogue? How can we do this without engaging? I understand this sort of model, because I do this work as well, of from a pro-Palestinian standpoint, if we can get, not we, I mean, but from that standpoint, if Israel can be ostracized enough and become a pariah state, then the power imbalance will change, and then maybe something can be done. Until then, it needs to be, just cut out from dialogue, and its representatives need to be away from the rest of us. Do you think that's a realistic, non-utopian goal, or am I misstating what the goal is of BDS?
So do you want to take up that one, or should I get one or two more and why don't you get some more? Okay, one or two more agreeable disagreements or disagreeable agreements. Yes.
I'll just keep going.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure, and I can't tell you how lovely it is to have a place to talk after the power of this, as Marc was saying, this beautiful art. I wanted to pick up the idea of, Marc, that you were noting that we've moved past a time where we can do peace through leadership, right? It was something to that effect, and that it has to be more generic and between people, and I certainly agree with that, but the stature of this man in the play, elder statesman, elegant, and thinking that's gone. I mean, it may be that that's the wrong way to go about doing peace, but we're beyond having anybody ever right now, at least in this context, stand up and promote through their own being peace. So I end up feeling like, is it gone, that time? We can't do it anymore? We just have shouting and screaming, we don't have any leaders? Or, Marc, maybe you're right, that we don't need them anyway. So I'd like to have this question of leadership, and have we passed a moment that we can't have anymore addressed?
Okay, one more quick one, and then we will give our, Rabbi. I had seen this, one sentence.
In the contest between a display of standing for our values and say like not killing the person at the top of our terrorist list versus the practical, okay, this person is about to do something bad, should we take action now to stop it? How do we make that decision?
Nice subordinate clauses there. Do one sentence here.
Yes, I'll try to make one sentence. I guess I get the last word. I'm a psychologist dealing with people in troubled relationships all day, so it's very different than people to people. But one thing that struck me when you used the term dialogue is the dilemma of how do you create dialogue when one of the parties in the dialogue is totally not open to a dialogue? And what do you do at that point other than violence?
Thank you.
I was going to say, which party's not open to dialogue, but it doesn't matter.
Sometimes both.
The first
Sometimes
last
both.
word.
Yeah. So on the BDS point, I don't speak for BDS, and it was a beautiful organic movement that Palestinians organized themselves. I would just suggest the importance of understanding the reality that Palestinians have endured from the founding, prior to the founding of the state, to the founding of the state, to the continued occupation. You cannot experience that level of denial of basic human rights, generation after generation, and not, there's that beautiful human spirit piece, right? Like you can't kill that, I think, for any people. So when they respond with a movement, a non-violent movement to isolate a country, to not say, we're going to play your sports teams, we're going to engage in your cultural programming, I think that's an important step to highlight the dehumanization process that's been endured. So I know it's really hard for folks who have such a strong relationship to what it could be, what it could mean, what all of those things. I can't profess to have knowledge of that, but I understand it's there. But for that to be something that overrides what we see and hear with our own eyes, what we continue to see repeatedly, and to say it's gonna get better is something that I think required a level of cognitive dissonance that I can't do. And the response, I mean, I won't buy products. I won't engage. And I would ask others to join me in that because of the importance of getting to a place where we reject that level of dehumanization and violence. So something as abhorrent as South Africa took us as a country here some time to get to the point where we would say politically, I mean, I think people understood it, Americans understood it, but politically, that was just too much. I don't know what it's going to take to understand that's too much. And that normalization, cultural, academic, otherwise, is the right thing to do in response to the material conditions prior to the genocide and after the genocide. So that's the part that I think is hard. And to be clear, I didn't mean I engage in dialogue all the time. I use sentences that later people tell me they landed this way and I learn. I don't have the privilege of not being effective. So I absolutely engage in dialogue. What the difference is that I used to do just Arab-Jewish dialogue because it was good for us to get together and sort of talk it through. There is so much coming at all of us, and I told the Rabbi how much I appreciated the fact that he's the one who first made the reference to the weaponization of anti-Semitism and the way that it's hurting, I think, first of all, our democracy, period, and certainly Arab Americans and specifically Palestinians now, and pro-Palestinian Jews and pro-Palestinian kids across the board. I mean, the amount of American Jews that are part of the pro-Palestine movement here that are being negatively impacted on these campuses is also there. So absolutely, dialogue is great. It just has to be to what end at this point, given where we are. But I welcome it, and I certainly, that's why I'm here engaging in this conversation.
Right.
Yeah, it's just an interesting, because of the length of time. I remember dialogue being at the center of Israeli-Palestinian relationships in the 80s and 90s, and then the frustration with that, because dialogue becomes an elitist affair. It's very verbal, it's among privileged people very often, it can be, it's feel good, and it's a dialogue of the deaf very often. You know, I state my narrative, you state your narrative. The relationship building that's taking place now across Israel between thousands and thousands of Arab Israelis, Palestinians, and Jews demonstrating for an entire year or 2 years now to the hundreds of thousands has created new relationships. Paradoxically, at the same time as fascism has grown in Israel in unprecedented levels. This Yigal Amir is now du jour on the streets of the West Bank. And thousands like him who are every day assaulting people, and things that Rabbi never could have dreamed of. But he did realize, and many people then, we all knew in 2000 and others, that if this didn't get better, if it was going to get much worse, because that's the history of violence around the world. People become more and more barbaric. And so by not making peace with Arafat, we got Hamas. By not making peace, we got not just a Yigal Amir or Meir Kahane, we got thousands and thousands of kids who are unrecognizable in the history of Judaism in the last 2,000 years, who relish burning down villages with payas on, with payas and big yarmulke. This is unprecedented in 2,000 years. Last time we had this was 2,000 years ago, literally, with Jews killing each other on the streets of Jerusalem, burning their own food, waiting for the Messiah. So this is exactly what we knew would happen. But Shoshi said the deepest thing to me. Shoshi, the secretary, has the line that says, we were on an airplane and we jumped out with Oslo without a parachute. And that's exactly my point about what's next and what's to be done. is that we can't build castles in the air with a few elites. It's a catastrophe. The transformation in German-French relationships after 1,000 years of fighting is deep, deep at the people level. The transformation between Protestants and Catholics after 400 years of killing each other in Europe is deep at the personal level, at the family level, at the business level. We cannot build something that doesn't build equality and passionate relationships across these lines. There were just a few of us. We were always a privileged few who knew, who loved each other. You know, people who were burned to death on October 7th, who were bringing Palestinians. They had deep relationships with Palestinian families. They were too few. But if, like Ireland, there had been millions and millions of dollars going into building those relationships of equality, we would be at the place that George Mitchell could come in and sign off on a new Catholic-Protestant relationship in Northern Ireland. We had none of that. There's no adults at the table in the leadership positions. So we have to ask ourselves, in this age of social media manipulation, where there aren't any brave leaders anymore, they're just calculating who they can influence the mob to hate. It's much more sophisticated now than Netanyahu had in the 90s, and what he conspired with Qatar to set up Hamas to make the PLO feckless. I mean, there's all sorts of manipulations that we've been through, and it's never been tried what happened in Europe, and that is billions of dollars going into relationships of trust and the future. And that's what I would like to see.
Thanks. I'd like to end it with thanking the both of you, and for me, just to say that the next story is activating a serious conversation about what the inequalities of rights and power mean in terms of voices that have to be heard, and that's the struggle ahead. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.